How's it going, everyone? And welcome back to the channel. Today, I decided that I would take the opportunity to just ramble through the tier lists that have been seen throughout Generation 9 and just kind of give a comparison of how everything has evolved over time. I know this could be a topic that some of you are fairly aware of, but I just kind of wanted to provide my own insight into it as someone that was involved in a lot of these tiering processes. And just kind of getting an insight into what went well with them, what went wrong with them, as well as also showing why this generation is as healthy as it is as a metagame, because of its lack of solve nature compared to other generations. So as you can see in front of us, we have the draft board from Scarlet and Violet for the most recent DPL season. This is the only board in this video that I was not involved in tiering in whatsoever. Actually, that's not true. I have one other example from early on. But most of it I was involved in. Just the joys of Smog Draft and DPL simultaneously. God, that was a time. But yeah, without further ado, I'd like to take you back in time to the year 2022, where this was the top end of our draft board. Yep, welcome back to Smog Draft Kickoff Tour. A tour where I decided that Terra Chen Pao should be legal, Terra Dragonite should be legal, Terra Palafin should be legal. Terra Annihilate should only be 13 points, which has been proven true at this point, so please just don't say anything to me. And yeah, it kind of, when you're tiering for an event in the first month, what I have commonly said is that you have to be okay with getting things wrong. And it's very safe to say that I got a lot wrong in terms of this. Here's Chimpao, what was I thinking? This was a very interesting tour, because as the biggest event at the beginning of Gen 9, there was no certainty over what way to approach Terra rules. DLC didn't even come out yet, so a lot of these mons were worse. And overall, it was just a lack of knowledge, because of lack of time. Like, that's the simple thing. So we decided to go with a rule set of you could get one Terra Captain, and that was it. This was also before Terra Preview was inscribed into either Showdown or DL. God, remember DL, guys? Yeah, that died a death. And yeah, so it led to an awful lot of volatile matchups. Terra Chimpao won a lot. Terra Dragonite won a lot. Terra Excalibur won the entire event, but that's just because Craig spammed Terra Dragon and it killed everything. This was also back in a time where Terra Volcarona was considered a class above everything else. And there was also a certain emu running around that was doing absolutely devilish work, as well as Annihilate, before its inevitable demise due to just how the metagame developed. So, just keep this in mind as our starting point. However, very soon after, and this is the only league that I'm actually going to show a draft board here, this is the first season of UDL that was ran. The only season of UDL, in fact, that was ran with a Gen 9 draft board. Shout out to Splurge for this, by the way. Also, God, I forgot about the colors on this draft board. Jenny Mac, guys. But, yeah. So the decision on this was also with one Terra Captain. However, this was the first time we ever saw a Terra Attack. And Terra Attacks, the decision for this event was to have it at 25% of the Mons value. So, for example, you can see Dragonite there for 20 points. However, if you wanted to Terra that Dragonite, you have to spend an extra 5 points as the Terra Attacks, so it cost you 25 points total. Get what I mean? Yeah, you all should know what Terra Attacks is by now. It's a pretty normal, avenue these days. But yeah, this was kind of the first time it was seen in an early event, and this would be adapted in many, many ways, and we'll kind of take that deep dive in a history lesson later. But as you can see, still a lot of fairly broken Terra Captains. You still see Dragonite there, you still see Palafin there. No Chimpao, though. Smart guys. This was back where we thought Terra Chiyu was a problem. Terra Excalibur's still there, Terra Volcarona's still there, Terra Annihilate. This was still when Terra Spathra was considered good. And you'll also just notice it in some of the decisions here, that you can see Miascarada down in 16. What else? Is there any other, major standouts? Yeah, no, the main one, this is also back in the day when Shedtail was legal, and Cyclizar with 13 points. Fun fact, in one of the conferences, Cyclizar actually went first overall. Yeah, TDK took that first before any of the broken Terra Captains, hoping that stuff would get back to him. Yeah, it didn't. But it was an interesting try. And the Shadespell conversation will come back up later, kind of once we circle back around to the days where it's just no longer considered a healthy metagame. And I think a board like this does surmise how Generation 9 is approached in general. Generation 9 has had so many different instances of points that it seems as though everything hinges on one thing. And it becomes so over-centralized to the point where it's not okay. Deadtail was one example. We're kind of having other examples now with top-tier Terra Captains, which I will get into later, or possibly in future videos where I choose to discuss the way that a current board is and go into how I would personally change it now that I'm no longer involved in anything. Yeah, I'll record that one later down the line, possibly close to DCL time. But yeah, this just kind of gives you an insight into we're still very early on, and people don't really know what to talk about. Fast forward a couple of months, and we get to DPL Season 7. And DPL Season 7 has a lot of changes compared to the early days. For example, we have the introduction of Team Preview and TerraType Preview, which was a massive innovation in terms of what was required for draft in general, to keep it in the healthy state that it was, because in the first couple of months, terrestrialization was a problem. Because it was a serious case of, oh, you got the 50-50 wrong? Yeah, you lose now. Because there was just no foresight on it. There was nothing you could do. So introducing Terra Preview was a big thing because you could plan for it ahead of time, even if you didn't get the Terra corrected prep. And with that decision, it was also decided to have 2 Terra Captains rather than 1. With the idea of that being the opportunity cost of, oh, if you choose to terrestrialize one mon, you can't terrestrialize the other mon. And it also gives a sense of bluffing in Team Preview and stuff like that. So, that in a lot of different ways. And as you can kind of see from the top board here, a lot of the stuff that was deemed as too much has gone. And in terms of your typical Terra Captains, you were honestly just seeing a lot of Chiyu, a lot of Urshifu. Excalibur was still legal and broken. Iron Bundle was a serious problem these days. Tornadus T, which you'll see is a constant throughout these. And this is also the first event where we saw a lot of mons kind of get put on fraud watch a little bit. The biggest example, as you can see in that 13-point tier, with a big fat 0 beside it, oh, our lovely Emu. However, this was not exactly how it started, because Spalter was drafted going into this season. However, very quickly, prep was discovered around it, and in the end, it was dropped multiple times because it was seen that it just could not keep up with it at the highest level of prep. And that happens at the beginning of a generation. You have a mon that on paper you think is really good, and then it gets to that DPL level of sweaty prep where people are figuring out all the text required, and all of a sudden, it just plummets. You can see that with multiple mons, but there's also some mons here to keep an eye on, which you'll kind of see rising later. So I'll just bring them to your attention now. King Gambit, which probably criminally underpriced. And where is the other one? I forgot what price he was back in the day. I'll find him here. Second, guys. Yeah, doing Samurai. He is going to be a big conversation because he fluctuates quite a lot in these metagames. And yeah, this was kind of a season where we figured out that some people had a much greater understanding of where the metagame was going to go compared to others. And the biggest examples of this is a certain Mr. Genius X, because he was kind of the main driving force behind these 2 mods at the time. And you'll see kind of as we go through subsequent events how they start to rise in serious popularity, and then inevitably fall back down again, which just kind of sums up this generation in a nutshell. We fast forward another 6 months, and this brings us to the first ever season of the Draft Champions League. Now, what has happened here is that there has been the release of the first DLC for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the Heal Mask, I think is what it's called. Yeah, I don't play the games. I hope I'm right. Do I care? Not really. And yeah, this was Smogon's first attempts of taking on a team tour in the draft environment. And so this tiering as well was also done. The auction was a grand total of 3 days after the release of the DLC. So we did not have a lot of time to figure out the new stuff. And that was kind of our downfall in this event. You do still see that there are some mons here that have stayed constant, and some that have dramatically fallen off. You also do have our Terrabands here. Gartonk got Terraband at this time. That was solely due to the introduction of Scale Shot. Palafin's gone, Radiolecki's gone. Pronaeus Therian was gone in this event as a Terra Captain because of its over-centralizing nature from the previous draft really. And that left us in a state where you see the top Terra Captains. Qiyu is still here. Volcarona was another common one. Annihilate is still very high in pricing. Iron Valiant wasn't max points yet. And just look at that rise for King Gambit, folks. That is a monumental rise between events. And that just kind of showed the popularity that Terra King Gambit was gaining at the time, and how often it was winning endgames. It led to a lot of conversations of, is it almost too good? And this was going to be the make or break event for it. And in terms of other stuff, as you can see here, some stuff was very overhyped. But that happens at the beginning of a generation, or of a metagame. You see Monkey Dory. Remember when we thought that thing was going to be good, guys? Yeah, that didn't last long. You have Terra Manaphy here with Take Heart, where people thought it just might not die. And it did well for this event, but it didn't quite pan out. And then if you look at the opposite end of the spectrum, you see a certain Ursaluna Blood Moon, which was legal for 14 points with Terra. And this mon was a problem. And it wasn't really copped on during the drafting phase, but mid-season was when it was really copped on in terms of, well, this mon is good. And oh boy, was this mon good. It didn't die. It killed everything. It was such a problem. And that was kind of the major mistake that was made in terms of what to allow. Not quite. I missed one. But I missed it for a good reason, because I'm going to be talking about this for quite a while. Now, where are you going? Yes. 16-point Ogrepon. I thought it was 15, that's why I was losing it. But, yeah, Ogrepon was a very interesting conversation at this time. The decision made with Ogrepon was to allow all forms together and treat it like Oricorio. That was a mistake. Oricorio. You can only look back at it and laugh without crying at this point. This mon ruled the metagame, because you had to prep for 4 mons, all of which were very good. Well, at this time, it was 2 that were the main standards. Ogrepon Heartflame, because it could just kill everything if it wanted to, and if you drafted it with good removal, then it was just game. And Ogrepon Wellspray, which had phenomenal stabs for the metagame, and was also just a really nice typing. And the Spadef boost helped versus a lot of the fast revenge killers found in the tier at the time. There was some limited usage for both Cornerstone and Teal, but we'll kind of get back to them later, particularly Teal, because Teal does kind of have its time later in the sun. But yeah, this was a one-off idea that was never fulfilled again, because holy shit, this was a mistake. And let me just think here, is there anything else of interest to note? Not really. Keep an eye on 15-point Zarude, because if we go back to DPL, it was for 13 points. And Zarude, at that time, it was winning games, but it wasn't a mon that kind of, people weren't really judging it the same way. They thought it deserved a price rise, because it was capable of doing a lot. But it still felt fairly underexplored at the time. And it still wasn't that explored in this metagame. And then we get to DPL Season 8, where even more changes. The biggest change at this time was, of course, the introduction of yet another DLC, being the Indigo Disc. And with this, also, I forgot to mention, actually, with DCL drafting, is the decision was made, instead of having infinite points for your Terra Captains, you were given 25 points for your Terra Captain budget. So if we just kind of look at some of these, for example, You can see some interesting low-tier Terra choices. Drifloon was a popular one. Ursaring was popular. Jolteon was incredibly popular and definitely was under-tiered for this event. Braviary, Hisuian Electro was another popular one. There was a lot of just cheap electric Terras, stuff like that. But yeah, it was the decision to kind of top tier and a low tier Terra. That was the common outlook at the time. And that rule was kept for DPL Season 8. And the idea of that was still people disliking the idea of having 2 top tier Terra captains to deal with every week, because that was incredibly oppressive in the previous DPL season. And some Terra bans were made, not a lot. The kind of main one to go in comparison to DCL was Volcarona, because Volcarona was kind of proven to be too oppressive at the time. It was winning an awful lot of endgames. Enamorus was close to going at this time, due to its high upside being shown. Sneasler, you can just see from the 21s here that some of these were just absolute problems. And with the introduction of the Indigo Disc, you saw a lot of mons getting introduced into a metagame that just had not been seen in any draft. They were seen as too much. Darkrai being the main one. Its power level was just nowhere near comparable to where it was in previous gens. And this was Blaziken. Speed Boost Blaziken, which had kind of seen it getting dropped into Generation 8. And it was only getting worse due to the power creep that was very evident at the time. In terms of major shifts between DCL and this DPL, interesting ones to note. Terra Greninja was getting usage at this time. This was solely due to King L5 and certain Drafting World Cup run that was going on at the time, which was running simultaneously for this event, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, that was gaining in popularity. Terra the Rude, as you can see there, has gone up to 19 points of value. And that was solely based off of a run by JCM Shadow in, oh god, what was the name of that Wi-Fi league? The OJ Albino one. TGS, I think. The Greatest Showdown. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, I know what I'm talking about. I'm totally rambling at this point, but who cares? You're still listening, I hope. Like and subscribe. Please. Go on. Yeah, so Terra the Rude was gone up to 19 points in value. Wasn't really given a lot of love in this event, though. 19 was kind of seen as too high. But it was also what happened in this event was there was a lot of Terramons at high value that were struggling to get the usage. As you can see here, you have Necrozma, 20 points, getting absolutely zero usage. You have Nihilate getting zero usage for the first time here. You have Terra Escadrille getting absolutely nothing. And there was some very popular ones. Terra Raging Bolt was popular. Terra Latias was popular. Terra Latias was broken at this time. It was just capable of winning so many endgames by itself. But it also had potential to just run Terra Dragon and clean up with like Terra Dragon Draco, Scarf endgames and stuff like that. The Ogrepons are split now, so that's a plus. Ogrepon Wellspring was proven to be the very, very much so the popular one. But there was some usage for Ogrepon Teal there, which was kind of showing a lack of grass resists going on in drafts at the time. Turkin Gambit was still incredibly popular at this time. You see it there with all usage. And yeah, there was a very obvious top bias that was very clear to see. You can Terrapagos was another one that was incredibly popular, having just been introduced. And here's its price. It was going very early, but that was solely because teams saw the value in it, saw that it was cheap, and were jumping for it early. And that's kind of what you need to do in these sorts of events. You need to jump on that value early to make sure you don't lose your critical piece. And that's why you see stuff like round 3 steals and some of these guys. Thanks, Undead. Yeah, thanks. What was very apparent from that DPL board was that there was a serious bias towards the top end of Terra Captains, and people were too afraid to experiment down the middle because of the high opportunity cost that it was to go without one of those top Terra Captains. There was a shift noticed in this, and that's what brings us to DCL Season 2. DCL Season 2, you did see a fair reset in terms of Terra bans. Gone are mons like Sneasler as a Terra Captain, that being the big one. You also don't have Terra Kyurem in this event. You don't have either Terra Lati in this event. which were incredibly common Terra captains, as seen previously. And that led to people needing to think a bit differently. There was still some fairly common ones. Terra Greninja, as mentioned, due to L5. Another big one was Terra Torn, obviously, because Terra Torn's amazing. Terra Wellspring was incredibly common. Terra Enam was still showing some decent results at this time. It will fall off soon, guys. Look here, Terra Annihilate. Oh, buddy, I'm sorry. You had such a fall off, but it was nice knowing you. Terra Raging Bolt was another one that was showing really common signs. There is one, of course, to mention. He's down here. He got drafted 3 times. He got like 50-something kills in this event. Oh, God. Yeah, this was the major moment where people decided, it might be kind of good. It was on all like the Valiant structures if you weren't an idiot and decided to draft Terra Tealpon instead. Hi, I'm the idiot that decided to draft Terra Tealpon instead. Because Terra Tealpon at this time was still incredibly popular. Oh, sorry for that scroll, by the way. I misclicked. Terra Tealpon was still incredibly popular at this time. Grass resists were still not great, but were improving. And there was a summer seasonal just before this where Terra Tealpon was showing good results. But this was kind of the beginning of its demise as the metagame just quickly moved past it and was losing its offensive nature. And that was due to the lack of the top tier Terra captains. There was a serious shift between Terra captains that would win immediately due to its power to bulky offense setup type situations, which also led to the rise in Healing Wish, led to slightly slower games and more sequence based. And it saw more innovation in terms of the Terra captain usage. If we go into the middle of the board here, Urshifu Rapid Strike was a mon that, despite only being drafted once, was getting serious popularity in this event. Terra Iron Moth was incredibly popular. Terra Iron Moth plus Terra Sinistra was the popular core that showed immense results in this event. You saw Terra Tornadus Therian getting joy in this event. You saw Terra Ceruledge getting joy in this event. There was a lot more variety, and it was really healthy to see. And this comes back to what I was saying about Generation 9 being a healthy metagame. There's very few consistencies that are seen throughout all of these draft boards. I think the only ones you can say are Great Tusk is good, Iron Valiant is good, oh, hi Deoxys Speed, yeah, you're legal, I think I forgot to mention that. Greninja is good, Meowscarada Rat is good. Like, there's stuff that obviously stays at the top of the board the whole time. But when there's so much variety in approach and so much variety in what people are thinking and trying to optimize to get the most success, it leads to an incredibly healthy metagame. And this was kind of Sword and Shield's problem. Because if you cast your mind back to approximately a year after the DLC releases of Sword and Shield, they were not healthy. Spectrier was forcing the brings of fat normals. People were kind of struggling to innovate. It was just shifting into a slightly more offensive metagame. Galarian Slowking Tornadus T-cores were incredibly popular. No one could decide whether Natdex or Galadex was the right metagame to play. And yeah, all I'm going to say on that is I much prefer to be in this metagame right now, where there is a hell of a lot less consistency, which means a hell of a lot more variety. And that's what you want. Especially playing a metagame where everything is about getting the one-up on your opponent. You want more options. We now arrive where we started. The most recent board used for the current DPL season. I imagine some of you are wondering why did I decide to skip events such as Draft League World Cup and the shifts that caused. Obviously, I was not involved in the tiering of Draft League World Cup because that was after I decided to step away from all Smart Draft related activity. But there was some changes that were seen there that have now been seen in this current DPL season and are definitely going to be a major impact moving forwards. You can see here the rise of a few mons. Obviously, you still have your constants. You're always going to have your constants in this metagame. And a lot more drop-offs, honestly. There was no consistency in regards to with DCL and some of those low-tier captains mentioned, but that's because you saw the rise of other low-tier Terra captains. And none stand out more than a certain Apple who can be seen... Oh my god, I'm losing it. Why can't I see you, mister... There we go. Hydrapple. This mon has become a serious topic of conversation lately, and that is because it is effectively mini tornadoes, except also gets access to recover and is nowhere near as fast. Hydrapple has become a serious staple in the metagame at the moment, and that is due to the slower approach that I talked about before. There's a lot more emphasis now on hazard stacking plus reliable spin blocking, and that is why Terra Ghost Hydrapple was seen as incredibly popular in Draft League World Cup, as popularized by Dunk, so shoutouts to you. Yes, you get a shoutout in the second video on this channel, well played. And that led to, because this beat like every rapid spinner. It is absolutely ridiculous that Terra Ghost has just beat rapid spinners with ease. And this was leading into a metagame where hazard stack into well-played spin block was just overwhelming people. Regardless of the offensive pieces that you would see in this metagame, there just wasn't enough to get through that archetype. And that's why you're also seeing people like Who have success with Terra Hydrapple teams with Senostone. Because you also, like, the combination of Terra Hydrapple plus Alamola is just proven to be an absolute pain in the arse. And no one's surprised. Just the way the metagame has gone. And once again, ties back into what I was saying about how have we gone from a generation that started out as bulky offense in its first DPL season to then go an incredibly hyper-offensive meta for its second season, and now all of a sudden we're going back to a slower, more bulky offense-based metagame. Which shifts are really nice to see, and it shows that there's no best way to play this metagame. You're also seeing certain mons getting a lot less usage. Obviously, you look at the top of the board, and you see mons that are in every other draft. But then as you go down, there's kind of no consistency in low tiers. You look anything under the price of 10, and there's only 2 mons that went in every single pool. That being Asui and Quillfish and Carbon. That would be unheard of in previous generations, where you knew what the low tier staples were going to be. Sure, we still know what the low tier staples are in certain gens. They get price hikes, but they still get drafted regardless, because what they do is too important. And what seems to be happening here is that people are completely undecided on what's the best approach. Another thing to note with Terra Captains is that there was a change from the 25-point budget to a 28-point budget, but also the inclusion of a third Terra Captain at the discretion of teams. And this was leading to a lot more of this mid-tier drafting. You see Terra Iron Moth still getting usage. Oh, look, Terra Annihilate's finally getting some love again. You see Terra Keldeo. Terra Gliscor is another one that's become incredibly popular due to this change. And it's just led to a lot more variety in people's approach. The slower hazard metagame has also seen the rise of Petrarunt, as it is the only ghost type that appears to be able to reliably beat the rapid spinners. It also just shuts down an awful lot of the physical metagame, and Toxic plus Parting Shot is an absolute pain in the arse to deal with. Who would have known? Iron Crown, as mentioned earlier, has now been drafted in every single draft. I don't think all of these were Terra. I haven't really been keeping up with DPL. The joys of being retired and all that. Retired. We'll get into that in another video. It's funny. And yeah, it just shows that it's proven as a pivotal piece, and Steel Psychic typing is really good in this gen. That's why Jirachi has also been drafted in every single one, and Metagross. It's just a really nice typing to have. The stance towards hazard removal has also changed in all of this, but I will also be covering that in a later video, as I think that's a topic that deserves its own 20-minute ramble. And that is about everything that I have to share. I hope people found this interesting. It's an insight into how things have changed, why this is a healthy metagame, and also showing how things have changed just between tours in general. Obviously, you do have the introduction of a couple DLCs, which act as outliers, but we're kind of reaching a point where things are hitting a stable point. But it's not a stable point to the degree of the metagame is solved and there's nothing we can do about it. There's going to be so many innovations in so many future events, and I can't wait to see what people come up with next. We still have another 18 months left of this metagame, most likely. So, I hope people are looking forward to still figuring this metagame out. There's so much to unpack. And that's what I plan on doing in this channel. Unpacking every little bit as it unfolds. I hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this is the kind of content that you're interested in. And let me know some other key topics you'd like me to discuss. I have some ideas on my own, but I would be interested to hear what you all think. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.